to wake up in the morning to the quiet of the cove and hear Aunt Bessie talking to herself, and to hear poor Uncle John mumbling wishes to O'Nell. It made me feel like everything was fine. I was born down by the water, it's here I'm gonna stay. I've searched for all the reasons why I should go away, but I haven't got the thirst for all those modern day toys, so I'll just take my chances with those saltwater joys. Following a little brook as it trickles to the shore in the autumn when the trees are flaming red, kicking leaves that fall around me, watching sunsets paint the hills. It's all I'll ever need to feel at home. This island that we cling to has been handed down with pride by folks who fought to live here, taking hardships all in stride. So I'll compliment her beauty, hold on to my goodbyes, and I'll stay and take my chances with those saltwater joys. How can I leave those mornings with the sunrise on the cove and the gulls like flies surrounding Clayton's Wharf? Platter's Island wrapped in rainbow in the evening after fog. The ocean smells our perfume to my soul. Some go to where the buildings reach to meet the clouds, where warm and gentle people turn to swarming faceless crowds. So I'll do without their riches, glamour and the noise, and I'll stay and take my chances with those saltwater toys. Some go to where the buildings reach to meet the clouds, where warm and gentle people turn to swarming faceless crowds. So I'll do without their riches, glamour and the noise, and I'll stay and take my chances with those saltwater joys.
Good evening and welcome to This Week in Review. Tonight our stories are LOBA Easter Party, an egret on Tree Ponds, Student Appreciation Week, Mr. Bill Matthews not seeking re-election, and an interview with our MHA Mr. Calvin Parsons. Please stay tuned for these stories after this. Try your luck and play TV bingo on Wednesday, sponsored by the B Division Dart Team. Cards are 6 for $5 and can be bought from any member of the Dart Team or in most stores around town. On Monday, April 9th, the LOBA held their Easter party. 33 children attended. A lunch of wiener and fries was served, followed by dessert of cupcakes and jelly. Tickets were then drawn. Door prize was won by Kennedy Lushman. Bunny by Alice Swift. Turkey by Elizabeth Dominy. Am by Jody McDonald. And Giz Cake by Melissa Compton. There was a visitor at Tree Ponds on Thursday, an egret. Early in the present century, this bird and its close relative, the snowy egret, were killed by hunters gathering plums, which were sold to the millinery trade. Plums are at the peak of perfection during breeding season, and it was then that the slaughter took place, the parent birds being shot from ambush as they returned to their nests carrying food for their young. The species was saved from probable extinction by the timely enactment of laws that forbade women to wear the plums on their hats. With no markets for the feathers, the killing ceased, and now the species has made a satisfactory recovery. The week before Easter, the teachers and staff held Student Appreciation Week at the school. The week started with breakfast on Monday. During the week, there were other activities on the go. Wednesday was Heritage Festival. It gave us all a chance to view some of our culture from the past. On Thursday, the last day of school for Easter week, the students were fed a spaghetti lunch. It was followed by dessert of ice cream. That afternoon, all the students were in the gym to be entertained by the teachers and staff. Here are a few scenes from that day.
And you're going to sing the catch-up song.
Bill Matthews will not be seeking re-election in the next upcoming federal election. In a news release held in Grand Bank on April 3, 2007, this is what Mr. Matthews had to say. I am announcing today that I will not be seeking re-election in the next federal election. I will continue to serve until the current Parliament is dissolved. I have been a member of Parliament since June 2nd, 1997. Before that, I served from April 1982 until February 1996 as the MHA for the District of Grand Bank. After approximately 25 years of public service and 8 elections, it is in the best interest of myself, my family, and the residents of Random Buren, St. George's, that I move on to make room for someone else. I sincerely thank my family, friends, staff, and the people of the District of Grand Bank and the riding of Random Buren, St. George's for giving me the pleasure of serving them for such a long period of time. Our MHA Calvin Parsons dropped by our studio for a chat. Today in our studios, we have our MHA Calvin Parsons. Good day, Mr. Parsons.
Good day. Good to be here again. It's a beautiful day.
Yes, it is a beautiful day. What brings you to Burgeo this time?
In town doing the clinic again. I try to do these every couple of months or so, and today was the day, so we always advertise on the BBS and come down and see a few people at the town office, or most cases now I find it's actually visiting people in their homes. Some people who can't get out for one reason or another prefer to have me drop by, and so I take the time and do that.
Oh.
So it usually takes a day to see everybody who's got a problem.
Do you get to see many people when you get there?
It depends. It varies from time to time, and strangely enough, it depends on the time of the year as well. Summertime, of course, with most people gone, you don't usually see that many. But this time of year, yes, you see a fair number of people. And in the fall again, once everybody's back in school, you see them again.
Oh,
But January, February, I found there weren't that many. Probably, I guess, because a lot of people were actually out of town working on the seismic work and so on. So now most of them are back in town again. So things have picked up.
Oh, very good. Is there any news about our water system?
Well, we've actually had several meetings in the last couple of months. The Mayor Reed and the town manager Blaine and myself have met with officials of the Department of Municipal Works and the minister actually on 2 occasions, and the engineers involved. And although the minister is not being outright saying, yes, it's a done deal right now, he says things look very, very positive, and I anticipate that we have to await the budget of April the 26th before we will actually have the minister announce anything. But I feel very confident and optimistic that we will see what we need to see in this year's budget on the water system.
Oh, very good. So what other things are on the go?
Well, and from a community point of view, of course, there's always some issues in the mix. We have the issue of Route 480, for example, and what, if anything, is being planned by government this year in terms of road work. I drove down this morning, and the road is deplorable, and it's getting worse, it seems, every year. In fact, if you don't do something to maintain it now, I mean, in 5 years out, we're going to have a major problem because there won't be any highway. And it's almost like driving on the end towards the TCH, from Peter Strides up to the TCH. I mean, it's almost like a cobblestone roadway now. And in the spring, of course, it's even worse, where the road is eaved up with the frost and so on. And there's no doubt that once the plows get back on it again next winter, if they keep rooting at it, and the wood trucks going over it, we're going to be in terrible shape in another couple of years on that roadway. So I've already written to Cyril McCarthy, who's the regional manager for work services and transportation, to see what is in their plans and ask them to make sure that Route 480 is included, because the whole road could use a topping, there's no doubt, but there's some areas there that are just treacherous, I feel, and are becoming safety issues and need to be addressed immediately.
Yes, there were several places where it got washed out.
That's right. And particularly in the center of the road, I mean, it's like intentional speed bumps almost. You just had to slow down, and or else you're going to do damage to your car and possibly go off the road. So it's getting to a point where it needs to be addressed, and sooner rather than later.
Okay.
And of course, we had the ongoing issue of the waiting room, washroom facilities for the ferry users here in Grey River and Ramia and Burgeo, and anybody who visits the area, quite frankly. Brought it up in the House last fall and kept on to the minister about it, and he's given an indication that we again can look forward to this budget. I believe we're in the range of $250,000 to $300 that we'll see coming to have a facility built here in Burgeo that will act as a waiting room area plus washroom facilities for users of the ferry.
Okay.
And it's long overdue, and we've been after it for quite some time. The council here has been after it for quite some time, and I think we've reached the point where enough pressure has been brought to bear that the minister has now agreed to, let's get on with it. So I'm looking forward to that coming out of this budget as well.
Okay. Will there be like a caregiver in that place, or?
Not sure if they're going to have a caretaker there on a full-time basis or just have it serviced by someone locally, for example, open it an hour before the ferry is due to arrive. But of course have arrangements made that if, excuse me, if the ferry is delayed and you need to have it open, that'll be an issue of how you're going to staff it. Once we get it there, they have to address that issue as well.
Okay. When you were talking about the Burgeo roads and that, what about the layoff of those road workers?
Again, Minister Hickey is suggesting that there's no impact on laying off these people because they were winter-time workers who were onto the snowplows and such. But according to the NAPE people, and from what we can determine, that's not true. I mean, these workers that are being laid off, many of them would have been normally on in the summer in order to do road work. And you can't do the necessary road work and the repairs if you're not going to have the staff on. So we've been pushing it as an opposition to say, don't have these layoffs. And NAPE, I notice, has also been pushing it. And it seems kind of contradictory to me for the minister to be out on the one hand touting about how we're putting $60 million into road work if we're not going to hire the people to do the road work, because all of this stuff is not contracted out. This is all not done by independent contractors. A lot of this stuff in terms of repairs and patchwork and so on that had to be done, it takes the permanent employees of the Department of Works and Transportation to do that. And they can't do it if they're not working. So they need to keep them on as part of the complement that you need in order to do the work that's necessary.
Okay. And also, too, they're saying now that the winter is not gone yet, and for the snowplow operators, that they're planning to land off.
Again, it's not unusual in Newfoundland that we have bad weather up into May month even, but and that's the plan. There needs to be a contingency plan in place. You can't lay them off, and if you're going to lay them off, you'd need some contingency in place. And quite frankly, I don't think this minister and this department have got those contingencies in place, and that's where the problems lie. It's no good to wake up at 4 or 5 o'clock on some given morning and find out that you don't have the workers that you need, but you got the snow that you didn't expect. You have to expect these things in our climate and be prepared for it.
Okay. Is there anything with the fisheries now? What kind of things are going on with that?
Fisheries, of course, don't fall strictly under myself. Fisheries are usually geared to the federal MP. Most of the things like quotas and licensing and everything all falls under the excuse me, the federal government. But of course, the fishermen who are impacted by these things, they don't care whether you're a provincial MHA or whether you're a federal MP. They want answers, and if they can't get them from one group, they always come to the other. And quite frankly, I see a lot of fishermen who are involved in the industry who come to us looking for advice and so on. A lot of people come to figure out what's this all about, the new capital gains tax things. There's some people who have issues with the harbor authorities. There's some who have issues with the price that they're getting down on the warfare with the buyers. There's people who have issues. For example, there's a petition taken up recently by fishermen in this area. In fact, I think it's gone all over Western Newfoundland now as to why fishermen, because there's a law in this province which says you cannot take unprocessed fish out of the province. But the fishermen are saying that's fine, and they agree with that. And the purpose of that law, of course, was to make sure that the processing got done here, because that creates jobs for people in this province by doing the processing. The downside of that law is if you've only got one buyer, for example, Ocean Choice here on the wharf in Burgeo, if that is your only buyer, the fisherman is impacted because he has nobody to drive the price up. He can only get the price that buyer is offering, so it keeps the fisherman's price low. So the fishermen are wondering, is there any way that we can bring someone in from outside Newfoundland and Labrador? Maybe, for example, a buyer in Nova Scotia or New Brunswick or PEI who might come in here and compete with the local buyers, and which drives the price up for the fishermen. And that's all fine and good for the fishermen. Because they get the best price that they can get because of that competition. And they're suggesting, well, maybe you should remove this processing rule, because if you removed the processing rule, which is currently in place, it would allow these buyers from outside to come in, buy, and take it back to their provinces for processing. But of course, there's ups and there's downs to that. is good for the fishermen because it increases their price because of the competition, but it gets rid of the good piece that you have, i.e. it keeps the processing in this province. So you're damned if you do, sort of, and you're damned if you don't, and one party is always hurt by the other. And we have an unusual situation here in this province where both the fisherman and the plant worker are represented by the same union, the FFAW, basically, in most areas, in some areas the UFCW, but in this particular area, Burgeo, it's the FFAW. So you have a case where sometimes fishermen say, well, we're not being properly represented by our union because they're not fighting to improve our prices, where on the same hands, that union is expected to stand up for the plant workers. So in the midst of all that, of course, you drag in politicians and say, what can you get done for us about this? Because the processing rule is a provincial rule. So we've had those types of issues, and I've written to the minister and explained to him that we don't want to negatively impact plant workers from the processing point of view, but what is it that we can do to make sure that fishermen maximize their pricing? So that's the type of issues you get into. Very complex, but they need answers, and that's what you're trying to do, of course, on behalf of these people, is go and try to find out where some of the answers might be. And once you find possible solutions, then you got to go down the roads to trying to get those solutions implemented.
Okay. Electoral boundaries, are they all completed now?
Yeah, the last time we met, I believe we discussed, I explained the possibility that the boundaries of Burgeo-Lapoil might be expanded, and there was a commission that recommended that Ramia and Grey River be now taken into Burgeo and Lapoil, and that report came to the House of Assembly back in the March month, and it was dealt with, and it's now law that the new electoral boundaries are in place. So as of the election, which takes place in October of this year, Ramia and Grey River will be included in the Burgeo-Lapoil district. So Oliver Langdon, who is currently the Liberal MHA for that area and takes in those two communities, that will not be part of his district in the future. It'll be part of the Burgeo-Lapoil district.
Okay.
It just means I have more people to represent in the bigger geographic area to represent. So I've already visited, of course. I haven't had a chance to get to Grey River yet, but I've made at least 2 or 3 visits so far to Ramia, just to find out who's on the councils, who's on the development associations, meet some of the people there, familiarize myself with the issues, so that rather than wait till October, I mean, someone has to look after their interests, and if they have any concerns now that I can help out with between now and October, I'm certainly more than prepared to do that as well.
Okay, very good. What do you think of the federal-provincial relationship now between Danny and
It's
Stephen
tough.
Apr?
It's tough. It's a tough call. On the basics of the commitment piece, I firmly agree with Premier Williams that Prime Minister Harper has broken his commitment. That goes without saying. The Prime Minister, if he wanted to put any caveats or caps in place, he ought to have done that when he wrote back to the Premier some months ago before the last federal election and clarified what it was he wanted to do or what he was prepared to do, and not be there now trying to say, I have not broken my word. He broke what he wrote. And the piece that I read, I actually read the letter, he has broken his commitment. There's no doubt about that. The unfortunate part is, where do we go from here? And how do you handle it now that he's broken his commitment? Do you continue to pound on the Prime Minister and say, look, well, you broke your commitment, which I think everyone agrees in this province he did do. He did break his commitment. How do you handle the fallout from that? Do you say, okay, you've broken your commitment there, make up to us in some other way for that? And what other ways can you make up to us for that? So I don't think we need to necessarily be political about it and say, you know, we're not voting for any Tories in the future or whatever. You've made the point. The point is the Prime Minister broke his word. Where we go from here? That doesn't solve anything just by saying he broke his word. You either ask the Prime Minister to keep his word, or if that doesn't work, what else can you do, Prime Minister, to fix or at least put us in a better position than you've left us now, because you did break your word? And that requires communication, and that requires negotiation. And it's kind of tough to sit down with Loyola Hearn, who's the regional minister, or the Prime Minister, or the Finance Minister, Jim Flaherty, and have these kinds of open, productive discussions and negotiations if you're pounding on these people. I think the point has been made that they broke their word. Now, let's move on. Let's sit down and decide how we're going to fix it. And unfortunately, we see that in a lot of cases with the Premier. The oil industry was another example. It was my way or the highway, and no such thing as, well, let's sit down and let the heads cool off a little bit here and go back at the table again. It was a case of, basically drove ExxonMobil away from the province and said, you're a nasty person, you're not fit to negotiate with, and that type of rhetoric doesn't get us anywhere in the long haul. It's fine to say, we don't need and we should not be giving resources away. There's nobody in this province who's going to disagree with that. But at the end of the day, if we're ever going to make use of the resources that we have, you had to talk to somebody to do it. And if you beat up on everybody who can be in a position to help you or negotiate with, where are you at the end of the day? There's no point in saying, and I've stressed this view in the House of Assembly, there's no point in us saying forever and a day that we're never going to let our resources be developed unless we reach the perfect deal, because we're doing this for the benefit of our grandchildren. If that's going to be 50 years out and there are no grandchildren here, this province can't last another 50 years, 40 years, even 30 years without us doing something to keep our grandchildren here. We had 5,000 people leave this province from 2003 to 2005. Actually, we had 10,800 leave. Of the 10,800 people who left, 5,200 of them were between the ages of 20 and 24. Now that's your grandchildren. You aren't getting any grandchildren if your people who produce your grandchildren, your 20-year-olds basically, are gone off to Alberta. They get jobs in Alberta and in Ontario. They set up their families there. They're not coming back. Their kids get in school, and there's where your grandchildren are being raised. So it's fine to take this patriotic, shall we say, view that we're never going to do anything with our resources unless we reach the perfect deal. But you had to be somewhat realistic in amongst all that, and you had to say, well, what is fair? And you hear the Premier talk on the one hand about what's fair, and then all of a sudden he clams up and won't give you the details. I've asked him 117 questions in the House of Assembly last fall about the Hebron-Ben Nevis deal and last spring. And he gave a few answers the first couple of days, but once he realized that I was on to some detail and wanted some level of detail, he wouldn't give any level of detail. So how do you ever assess if a deal is good or bad if someone won't give you the details of what you've negotiated so far to look at to see if it's good or bad?
Yes.
So some big problems there, and taking this fighter stance doesn't always work in my view. There's time to stand up, there's time to be counted. No, we don't need to be giving anything away, but you always had to be communicating with the other person. If you don't have the lines of communication open, you're never going to go anywhere.
Okay. What about the impact of the reduction in the quota for the seal? Do you think there's much of an impact?
Again, it's a motherhood issue. The sealing industry and Newfoundland, anybody who's a Newfoundlander and Labradorian, when you talk about we can't hunt seals, it automatically gets your blood boiling, because we figure, who are these International Fund for Animal Welfare people and the environmentalists and the tree huggers people say, telling us that we cannot conduct what is always been the traditional cultural industry for us. There's a lot of lies out there. There's a lot of falsehoods. They show pictures of white coats, which we haven't killed since the mid-'80s. So it's propaganda in a lot of these organizations. The quota reduction, again, where is the science? What is the science good or not? It's like our cod fishery. We hear people say that we're not allowed to have any increased quota for codfish on the South Coast because there's no science to indicate that there's been a recovery to justify that. Yet you talk to the fishermen and they're saying they're getting better catches than they ever got. So the same thing applies in the sealing industry. What is the science? Do we have 5.4 million seals, or do we have 7.2 million seals? Are the seals declining or are they improving? And that's where your quotas are increased or decreased, of course, based on that science. And I think we have suspect science in the case of the seals, the same as we have suspect science in the case of the cod fishery. So we need to get good science before you start making these decisions. And there has to be a saw-off somewhere between allowing the seal population to increase and increasing the quota. Because the more you allow the seal industry to increase and you don't increase the quota, that's just more seals eating more fish. And albeit the sealing industry is very important to us, I believe that the groundfish industry is far more important to us, and the cod fishery is far more important to us. So whatever needs to be done to maximize the recovery of the cod fishery, I believe, is where we need to go. So that requires keeping a very close eye on the sealing fish, industry, doing everything possible to make sure that it stays alive as an industry, and doing whatever is possible so that people like the IFAW can't interfere in something that's none of their business. That's my view.
Okay. So, House of Assembly, would that be reopening soon?
The House is due to open now again on April the 24th. That's a Tuesday. It'll open with what they call a speech from the throne.
Okay.
That's the Lieutenant Governor comes in and he will explain on behalf of the government itself, the Premier and his cabinet and so on, will actually have a speech prepared. That's the throne speech, and that's read by the Lieutenant Governor, Mr. Roberts, and it'll basically outline where the Premier and his cabinet says they want to go to in the next year or 2 year period. And that's on a Tuesday, and then the House is open again on Thursday the 26th, and that'll be Budget Day. And all that happens on that day is the Minister of Finance will come into the House and present his budget. Now, we've seen a lot of the budget stuff already, because what governments used to do in the past was you'd have Budget Day, everything was totally secret until Budget Day came, and then they'd read it off, and then people would say, okay, are we in for some perks, or are we in for some increases in taxes and fees and so on? Today, governments don't operate like that. They try to maximize or get the best spin that they can for the money that they're spending. So we actually started to see government announce back some months ago stuff that was going to be done. You've been told, for example, that ferry rates are going to decrease in some places. You were told that there's going to be certain schools built in certain places. There's going to be so many teachers retained in the educational system, and so much money going into a hospital construction. All that money is still not approved yet. That's all coming in the budget. So what they do is they get two bangs, shall we say. They go out and announce it in February, and then they sometimes announce it in March, and then they turn around and go out and actually do the budget in April. So that's just government putting their media spin and trying to get as much credit as they can, of course, for the money that they're going to spend. This government is very famous for this, very good at this. The roads work, for example, is a prime example. We've got it announced this year that there's $60 million being sent by this government for roadworks in this province, the highest amount ever being spent, they say. The problem is 32 million of it, or excuse me, 28 million of it is money they didn't spend last year. So it's not a new figure of 60 million. It's this year's amount of 32 plus what they didn't spend last year. So they're coming out and saying, well, we're actually spending 60 million. That's true, we are spending 60 million, but it's because they didn't spend it last year when they should have.
Okay.
The other thing, of course, that's going to be coming up, I do feel, in the House is going to be the fiber deal. And that's the fiber optic piece, because that is not going away. It won't go away, and it can't go away, because quite frankly, the Premier and his cabinet buddies gave $15 million of taxpayers' money to his buddies, and that's just not permissible. They didn't go through any public tendering act. They didn't go through any requests for proposals. We can't find out the justification for the money being spent. The Premier refuses to talk about it anymore, and that's not good enough. If you're spending taxpayers' money, you have an obligation to see that it's being spent properly, and not just to your friends. And we've gotten the Auditor General involved in this. He's been out the last 2 or 3 weeks now saying that he's got roadblocks put in his way. He's not getting the information that he wants. And as much as the Premier would like this to go away, this is too close to him. He was the man at the top who dealt with this, and it's his friends and their companies who benefited from this. And we must get to the bottom of this, and that's going to be an issue that's coming up again in the House, because you can't try to deflect attention from it. It's an issue, it's a serious issue, and somebody has given authority for $15 million to be spent without the due diligence being done.
Mr. Matthews, our MP, he's resigning now, so you got any nominations for the plans for the federal?
Well, that's another complicated situation. Bill Matthews did announce last week that he's not seeking re-election. He's going to stay on until the next election. The problem is, from my perspective, is I've always had an interest in federal politics, but the timing is going to be depending on where it happens, because for example, the election federally does not have to be held until possibly 2009. So the problem is, if the Liberal Party calls the nomination for their nomination anytime soon, it would mean that the person who successfully got that nomination could have to wait for up to 2 years to actually run in a federal election.
Okay.
So that's fraught with problems for someone like myself. I'm a provincial politician right now. I've committed to running in the next provincial election. So it may be just pie in the sky for me to even think about it now, because if it happens between now and October, it just doesn't fit my plans. Now, you know, if I get elected in October again, and if 2 years down the road there's a federal election and a nomination, that's a different situation. I'd have to take a look at it then and see. But right now, the timing just doesn't look like it's going to fall, whereby I might be able to take a look at it.
Okay, very good. So is there anything else that you would like to add and tell the...
I just, again, I'd encourage everyone who, when you hear about these clinics that are being held down here, I realize like a lot of people can't get out, and a lot of people don't want to come out privately, like in a town hall atmosphere to meet with you or whatever. They like to do it in the privacy of their own home. By all means, let us know. And in fact, don't have to wait to clinics if there's something urgent that needs to be talked about. And, you know, it has to be face-to-face. Let us know, and we'll do the best we can to make sure that we arrange something. Otherwise, any issues, we always want to make that clear to everybody. My phone number, I think I send everybody a Christmas card in every mailbox, and my contact information is on there. And Joanne Clark, who's my assistant, is with me, and myself. By all means, any issue whatsoever, keep in contact, make a telephone call. Look at the broadcasting system, and if I'm down here, by all means let me know, and we can either meet down here in the clinic or else I'll come to your home. Not a problem. I'm down there many other times, of course, besides the clinics. I come down for all kinds of events and so on that's happening in the community. But I specifically come down for clinics because I want to meet one-on-one with those people who don't want their issues dealt with by phone. And it could be a detailed situation where they just like to have the comfort of sitting face-to-face with you, telling you their problem, and see if you can help them. And by the way, that's about, I would say that's about 70% of my job, is people don't see that piece. People only see if you're on the House of Assembly broadcast or on the news or you're down in town for some function or whatever. But actually about 70% of what I do is on the phones with people, trying to resolve their issues for them. Could be anything from a healthcare issue, a social service issue, an educational issue, a student loan issue, a fisheries issue, a licensing issue, a seniors issue, Canada pension plan issue. There could be anything, and that's where most of our work gets done, is behind the scenes. And so far we've been pretty successful at it, and I'm pleased to say, and I enjoy that piece of the work big time.
Very good. Well, thank you for coming and visiting us.
No problem, anytime.
And anytime you're in, just pop by.
Will do.
The Burgeo Lions Club, in conjunction with All Lions Club in Newfoundland and Labrador, is selling new subscriptions to the Down Home magazine. This is a fundraiser whereby $15 from every subscription sold is donated to the Lions Max Sims camp. A yearly subscription costs $36 and can be purchased from Lions Max Bellard, Stan Kosser, or any Lions member. April 15th to the 21st is recognized as Volunteer Week 2007. Town of Burgeo invites community groups and individuals to nominate a volunteer for recognitions at the upcoming Earth Day Festival Awards Night on Saturday, April 21st. Contact Councillor June Escock at 886-2069. I wish to make my apologies for there not being no news over the last 2 weeks. It was caused by equipment failure, and that was beyond our control. Your patience in this matter was greatly appreciated. This concludes our program for tonight. Thank you for watching. Good night.